So, I'm Dr. Valluri Nikita, working as an assistant professor. So, I'm here to teach you pharmacotherapeutics 3, as you all know. So, in the last three classes, the topics we discovered are like peptic ulcer disease, gastroesophageal reflux disease, and inflammatory bowel disease. And now, today, we are going to discuss a new topic, that is alcoholic liver disease. Okay. So, what do you mean by alcoholic liver disease? So alcohol causes liver disease, that all we all know. And like, how does alcohol cause liver damage, and in what amounts alcohol causes liver damage, and what is the pathogenesis behind it, and what was a pharmacological treatment that can be done in the treatment of the consequences caused by alcoholic liver damage. Okay, so now I'm sharing this PPT. I think it's visible to you. Okay. So alcoholic liver disease. See, alcohol is causing liver damage. Okay. So what do you mean by alcoholic liver disease? Liver disease is nothing but it is a result of overconsumption of alcohol that damages the liver. So how does it affect the liver? That will be seen in three consequences. The first and foremost thing is buildup of fats, and then second, the next it progresses into inflammation and then scarring. So it can be fatal. It takes place in three forms. One is fatty liver, the other is fibrosis, and the other is, that is hepatitis, that is inflammation of the liver, and then scarring. What do you mean by scarring? That means formation of a fibrous tissue, and formation of scar is called as scarring, and the end stage we call it as cirrhosis. So it can be fatal if it progresses to this cirrhosis. Okay. So alcoholic liver disease it includes the manifestations of alcoholic overconsumption, including fatty liver. Fatty liver means buildup of fat globules within the liver cells, and then alcoholic hepatitis, that means inflammation of the liver, and then chronic hepatitis. So it's on long term progression, it leads to chronic hepatitis, which is manifested as cirrhosis or fibrosis. As I said, that there will be formation of fibrous tissue. Okay. So usually those who are having alcoholic liver disease, in the initial stages they won't be experiencing any symptoms, like they won't show any signs and symptoms. So until and unless the disease progresses, till then there won't be any symptoms in the early stages, until it reaches end stage, or when it reaches the hepatitis stage, then only the patient will be starting will experience symptoms. Okay. So how much of alcohol causes liver damage? So if you take alcohol, occasionally it doesn't cause liver damage, because our liver has a high capacity of it will detoxify whatever the toxic substance, or it has ability inbuilt ability to detoxify it. But when the level is reached, like overconsumption has been taken place, then only it causes liver damage. So how much of alcohol causes liver damage? We are studying in men and women. In men, like 75 to 100 ml per day daily if they take, and if they consume it for 20 years, it causes liver damage. And then when compared to female, that is women, it will be like at the around 25 ml per day is sufficient to get liver damage. So what does it mean? In men, 75 to 100 ml per day causes liver damage, whereas in women, 25 ml per day also causes, even that much slow amount also causes liver damage. That means women are at a high risk of, double the risk of getting alcoholic liver disease when compared to men. Okay. So if you can see here, this is the metabolism of alcohol. So as you all know that alcohol, it undergoes reduction, gets converted into aldehyde. And when this aldehyde undergoes reduction, it gets converted into acetyl CoA and carbon dioxide. So then it enters into tricarboxylic acid cycle in general process. But when this amount is more, or during the conversion of ethanol alcohol to aldehyde, during this process, what are these released? Reactive oxygen species will be released during the presence of certain enzymes like CYP2E1. Like when there is high alcohol consumption, usually NAD plus gets converted into NADH, but when there is high alcohol consumption, there will be release of reactive oxygen species that are microsomal ethanol, and in the presence of enzyme like methanol, microsomal ethanol oxidizing enzyme, NADPH converts into NADP plus. So when this process takes place, it causes the release of certain oxygen free radicals. Once again, I'll repeat. So whenever the alcohol it undergoes in the normal process, alcohol, it in the presence of alcohol dehydrogenase converts to aldehyde and then to acetyl CoA, and which enters into tricarboxylic acid cycle. But when the consumption of his alcohol is very high, instead of in the presence of alcohol dehydrogenase, here the enzyme called microsomal ethanol oxidizing enzyme plays an active role, and it will help in the conversion of NADPH to NADP plus. It's an oxidizing enzyme. So in this process, when this process takes place, it causes the release of certain oxygen free radicals. So if you can see here, ethanol in the presence of CYP2E1 enzyme, it gets normally it should be converted into NADP plus and water, but when it is taken in the higher concentration, it causes a release of free oxygen free radicals. Okay, so when these oxygen free radicals are released, they will react with the tissues and cells, causing their damage, protein denaturation, DNA damage, all these things will be taking place. Okay, so this is the things that we can see in the metabolism of alcohol. And then who are at risk in getting alcoholic liver disease? See, in this a few parameters are taken into consideration. The first thing is quantity of alcohol taken. As I said that 75 to 100 ml per day for 20 years in case of men and 25 ml per day in case of women who are taking it, they are at a high risk of getting hepatitis and fibrosis by 7 to 47%. Okay, and then pattern of drinking, that means if like at what time the person is taking alcohol. Drinking outside of meal times increases up to 3 times the risk of alcoholic liver disease. That means if they are taking alcohol, consuming alcohol, but they are not taking food, in that condition also they are at high risk of getting alcoholic liver disease. And gender, as I said, that women are twice susceptible to alcoholic liver disease compared to men. And then hepatitis C infection, those who are having hepatitis C infection, and again if they are taking alcohol, they are double the risk of getting alcoholic liver disease. So this hepatitis C infection, it will accelerate the process of liver injury. And then genetic factors. So genetic factors predispose both to alcoholism and alcoholic liver disease. So because of polymorphisms in certain enzymes. And then iron overload, that is hemochromatosis, as that means generally hemoglobin level will be decreased in case of anemia, but in case of hemochromatosis there will be increased hemoglobin. So when there is more amount of blood, there will be more amount of iron in that. So iron is a heavy metal, so heavy metals obviously they cause cell injury, right? So when there is iron overload, that in case of hemochromatosis it also causes liver damage. And then dietary factors like in case of alcoholic liver disease, and there is no proper metabolism of vitamins, or proper absorption of vitamins can't be taken place properly. So it leads to like vitamin A and D deficiencies which are there. What does they do? They will cause the regeneration of hepatocytes, vitamin A and vitamin E. So if they are having deficiency of vitamin A and vitamin E, even when the liver cells are damaged, liver will lose the capability of again regenerating. So due to vitamin E and vitamin E deficiency, liver cells cannot regenerate new hepatocytes. So this also may worsen the alcoholic induced liver damage. Okay, so this is all about risk factors. And now coming to symptoms, as I said that initially in the earlier stage there won't be any symptoms in case of patients who are having consuming alcohol. So until and unless like if they have taken consumed a large amount of alcohol suddenly on a one day, then it causes acute symptoms. And also if they are consuming alcohol for a longer duration of time also causes certain symptoms. So it includes digestive symptoms like pain and swelling in the abdomen, decreased appetite, weight loss. If you can see that who are chronic alcoholics, most of them will be so lean because of there is decreased appetite. So there will be weight loss, and they'll be having nausea and vomitings and fatigue, dry mouth. That means they'll be having more increased thirst will be there. Bleeding from the enlarged veins in the walls of lower part of the esophagus, that we call it as esophageal varices. Esophageal varices. This can be seen in case of alcoholic liver disease patients. So these are the digestive symptoms: pain and swelling in the abdomen, decreased appetite, anorexia, that is weight loss, nausea and vomiting, fatigue, dry mouth, and increased thirst, bleeding from the varices, that is esophageal varices, can be seen, and certain skin problems. So what are the skin problems? Usually there will be alteration in the LFT levels, right? LFT, that means bilirubin levels will be altered. So you can see yellowish discoloration of the skin and sclera and mucous membranes. That means jaundice can be seen, and small red spider-like veins on the skin. That means they'll be having petechia, or like, see, small blood capillaries, whatever are there, they get bursted out. And in case of generally, all the clotting factors will be produced in the liver, right? So when there is damage to the liver, or when there is inflammation to the liver, these clotting factors will not be produced normally. So there will be some kind of leakage on the skin surfaces that can be seen as red spider-like veins on the skin. And very dark or pale skin can be seen, redness on the feet or hands, and itching can be seen. When there is alterations in these LFT levels, it causes itching. Okay, so these are the skin problems. And then brain and nervous systems symptoms, and mood changes can be seen, and getting easily dizziness, fainting can be seen, numbness in the legs and feet can be seen. These are the symptoms related to brain and nervous system. So if you can see this, if you see this, this is a healthy liver and this is fatty liver. So in this stage, there will be deposition or accumulation of large fat globules. So because of that, there will be increase in the size, and liver fibrosis. So whatever the tissue is there, damaged or injured tissue, that will be replaced with fibrous tissue, that we call it as fibrosis. And in case of cirrhosis, that fibrous tissue will be replaced with connective tissue. There will be complete damage of the liver cells will be taken place. So this is the end stage. Okay. Healthy liver, fatty liver, liver fibrosis, and then cirrhosis. These are the stages of liver damage. So till it reaches this liver fibro, till it reaches here, we can reverse it from here to healthy liver. But when it reaches a cirrhosis, it's an irreversible process. So it cannot be returned back to the normal condition. So in that cases, we'll be going for liver transplantation. So this is the pathophysiology, like chronic ethanol intake. It causes a release of acetaldehyde and NADH production. So whatever the NADH is produced, it causes lipogenesis. That means it will encourage or it will increase the production of lipids, and also it will decrease the fatty acid oxidation. That means metabolism of lipids will be decreased, but the production of lipids will be increased. Okay. So it leads to fatty liver. That means whenever it's not getting metabolized and production is increased, whatever the lipids are produced, they gets accumulated or they gets deposited in the liver cells, causing fatty liver. And then oxidative stress, and when this NADH production is there, it causes the release of certain oxygen free radicals, which causes oxidative stress, thereby causes the liver cells injury, that is hepatocyte injury. And acetaldehyde also causes lipid peroxidation, that also causes hepatocyte injury. And then if you see these are the sinusoidal cells, and these are the gut derived endotoxins. When there is chronic ethanol intake, these are the normal structures of the liver cells or hepatocytes. So when there is chronic ethanol intake, it causes the activation of, in the presence of, as I say, microsomal ethanol oxidizing enzymes will be released. So they will activate the production of certain pro-inflammatory cytokines, and inflammatory cytokines like TNF, that is tumor necrotizing factor. So when these are released, they cause inflammation of these hepatocytes. So the shape of the hepatocytes will be changed to stellate cell activation. So then there will be increased when these cells gets activated. So they'll cause the increase in the collagen synthesis. When collagen gets replaced, this fibrin material, it causes liver fibrosis. Okay. So these are the stages of liver damage. So initially there will be fatty liver when there is increased lipogenesis and decreased fatty acid oxidation. And when this process is taking place continuously, it causes the activation of certain inflammatory cytokines. When these are get activated, they will cause inflammation of the cell, that is hepatitis will be seen. So even when it is gets progressing, it will activate the hepatic stellate cell activation, so which increases the collagen synthesis. Whatever the collagen is synthesized, they gets replaced with the normal or damaged tissue, causing liver fibrosis. So this is the pathogenesis of alcoholic liver disease. I hope everybody is clear. So, the same thing is being explained here. Fatty change or steatosis. It's also called as steatosis. So it's nothing but accumulation of fatty acids in the liver cells. So macrovesicular steatosis, that means large fatty globules get accumulated when the alcohol gets converted into aldehyde in the presence of alcohol dehydrogenase. Whatever the acetaldehyde is, that this acetaldehyde will increase the lipogenesis and decrease the lipid oxidation. So there will be when there is higher NADH concentration, there will be increased fatty acid synthesis and decreased metabolism. So and also along with this fat globules, triglycerides also gets accumulated, resulting in the fatty liver. The symptoms could be like weakness. That means this is the early stage, right? In the early stage, the patient will experience the symptoms like weakness, nausea, that is vomiting sensation, abdominal pain, and loss of appetite, and malaise, that is general unfeeling, like feeling of unwell, that can be seen. Okay. And then the other stage is alcoholic hepatitis. So like 10 to 35% of the heavy drinkers, obviously they'll develop this alcoholic hepatitis. So this is also called as alcoholic steatonecrosis and liver fibrosis also. So as I said that when this in the high amount of alcohol consumption is being taken place, it will activate the microsomal oxidizing enzymes, peroxisomal oxidizing enzymes. So these will activate the inflammatory cytokines like TNF alpha, interleukin 6 and interleukin 8. So when these are released, they cause inflammation of the cells, and thereby they causes liver injury by inducing apoptosis and necrosis. The symptoms could be like pain or tenderness. In the second stage, there will be pain or tenderness in the abdomen. Jaundice can be seen. Spider-like veins appear on the skin. Malaise, fever. Here, fever can be seen, whereas in that fatty liver, we cannot see this fever, nausea, and loss of appetite. In the end stage, hair color will be lost. Hair loss can be seen. I'm sorry, hair loss can be seen. Dark colored urine. So when there is jaundice, they'll be having dark urine, black or pale stools. So when there is a iron, like when there is bleeding during the rupture of these esophageal varices, there will be black or pale stools, dizziness, fatigue, loss of libido, that means loss of sexual interest, and bleeding gums or nose. Bleed as clotting factors are produced from the liver. When liver is damaged, clotting factors will not be produced properly, resulting in bleeding of the gums and nose, and edema, vomiting, muscle cramps, and weight loss. So these are the symptoms that we can see in case of alcoholic hepatitis. And then coming to cirrhosis, I think as I said that cirrhosis is the last stage of cell injury marked by inflammation, that is swelling, fibrosis, that is cellular hardening, and damaged membranes preventing the oxidation of detoxification of chemicals. Generally, the actual role of the liver is to detoxify any chemicals in the body. But this ability will be lost due to formation of scar tissue. As I said that whatever the activated hepatic stellate cells, they will increase the production of collagen. So when this collagen gets accumulated, it will replace the normal or dead cells, causing the complete loss of its ability to detoxify the chemicals, resulting in the end stage by causing scarring and necrosis. Complete cell death will be done. And between 10 to 20% of alcoholics will develop cirrhosis of the liver. Like if they are not stopping consuming alcohol, if they are continuously on progression, if they are taking, it causes cirrhosis. And acetaldehyde is responsible for fibrosis by stimulating collagen deposition. Okay. The symptoms are like jaundice, allowing hepatomegaly because of inflammation and also because of accumulation of this connective tissue. And there will be pain and tenderness from the structural changes in the damaged liver structure. So this is healthy liver, this is the fatty liver, this is a bit yellowish in color due to accumulation of fatty lipids, and this is cirrhosis. There will be hepatomegaly can be seen in cirrhosis because of deposition of collagen or because of deposition of this connective tissue. And then diagnosis. So for diagnosis, first thing what we do is liver function test, that is serum albumin, bilirubin, SGOT, SGPT, alkaline phosphatase. So all these things we have to monitor. Like they will be increased, bilirubin will be elevated, all these liver enzymes will be elevated, and albumin globulin levels will be decreased. Okay. And then, so these are the things what we see in case of liver function tests. And also prothrombin time. Prothrombin time increases. That means it's a prothrombin time indicates a clotting time. So because of deficiency of this decreased production of these clotting factors, it will take a lot of time for the blood to get clotted. So prothrombin time also gets increased, elevated. And then imaging studies like ultrasound scan, CT scan, MRI can be done. But ultrasound scan is done only like to know what was the, like whether it is fatty liver or hepatitis, or like to, and also to change to differentiate the hepatic parenchymal changes. These tests will be done. So, and also to diagnose whether it is fatty changes or cirrhosis or neoplastic diseases. In order to, especially in order to rule out this neoplastic, that is cancer disease of the liver, will be going for CT and MRI scannings. And then liver biopsy, when is this liver biopsy done? Especially when the serum aminotransferases like SGOT, SGPT are persistent, like for greater than 6 months, they are continuously elevated. At that time, we'll go for liver biopsy to rule out whether any malignant changes. And patients who have evidence of liver failure, like that is abnormal prothrombin time and decreased albumin levels, and along with elevated aminotransferases, then we'll go for liver biopsy. And if there is any coagulopathy is present, that means the high risk of internal bleeding is there. At that time, will go for transjugular biopsy is safer than percutaneous biopsy. So this is called as percutaneous biopsy. That means here from this skin through cutaneous region, they will insert this needle into like by palpating, they'll find out the location of the liver, and then directly they'll pierce into the liver. That is called as percutaneous liver biopsy. And transjugular biopsy, so it is also called as transvenous or transjugular. So from this jugular vein, they'll insert a needle, and then they'll send a catheter and a guide wire, which will guide it into the, until it reaches the liver, it will be sent. And from them, and from that region, they'll collect a small tissue. So that is called as transvenous or transjugular liver biopsy. It will be done under local anesthesia. And then endoscopy, as we know that it is like it's a like camera like thing will be sent from the mouth. So it is generally used to check whether there is any esophageal varices, and also to check whether there is any inflammation in the GI lining. So for that purpose, we'll be going for endoscopy. And then what are the complications of alcoholic liver disease? First thing is portal hypertension. So it's the most common complication of cirrhosis. So when the liver becomes enlarged, when the size of the liver becomes enlarged, and when it gets scarred, that means the tissue of it becomes hard. So when it becomes hard, it will not allow proper flow of blood to pass through the cells of the liver. So at that time, what will happen? The blood cannot easily pass through the liver, causing increase in the blood pressure in that region. So that we call it as portal hypertension. Okay. So in order to, and then when there is high pressure, as there is cirrhosis of the liver, and it became very difficult for the blood to pass through it, even though it tried somehow, and by causing portal hypertension, even then also it's unable to pass out, it's unable to supply blood to the liver. At that time, what will happen? There will be formation of esophageal varices. That means these are the new blood vessels. So a new blood vessels will be generated or produced by forming a new blood vessels, usually along the lining of your stomach or the esophagus. A new blood vessels will be formed for carrying blood to the liver, food from throat. So whatever these new blood vessels form, these are called as varices. So even after the formation of these varices, even then, so as we know that as angiogenesis, that means new formation of new blood vessels. So these the outer membrane of these newly formed blood vessels will be very thin. So even after the formation of varices, even if the blood supply or blood pressure is very high in these new blood vessels, what will happen? They will get ruptured and they'll get bursted out. So when they get bursted out, it causes severe bleeding in that region. Okay. So when there is severe bleeding due to damage, due to bursting of these varices, it leads to anemia because of heavy blood loss. So I clear. So what do you mean by portal hypertension? When there is scarring of tissue or formation of this hard of the hard mass or scarred tissue, it will become very hard for the blood to pass or to move through it. So that we call it as portal hypertension. Whatever the pressure in the blood is there because of this increase in the size and scarring, that we call it as portal hypertension. So, so when there is no proper blood supply, it will find a new way to pass to supply this blood through the stomach. So these new blood vessels will be formed along the region of this stomach and the esophagus, that we call it as varices. Okay, so when these varices are formed, even after the formation of the varices, if the blood pressure is very high, then these varices will get bursted out. They get bursted out, causing the bleeding. So thereby it leads to anemia because of heavy loss of blood from these newly formed blood vessels. It leads to anemia. Okay. So, how do we treat this portal hypertension? So, first, so before going to treatment, we'll start with symptoms of portal hypertension. There will be ascites. Ascites, that means accumulation of fluid in the peritoneal cavity is called as ascites, and hepatic encephalopathy. That means it causes when there is happens, there will be release of certain toxins, that we call it as hepatic encephalopathy. And pancytopenia. Pancytopenia means loss of different forms of blood cells. That means decrease in white blood cells, like a decrease in WBC, or decrease in hemoglobin, and decrease in neutrophils, like that. If there is more than two of the blood cells or decrease, then we call it as pancytopenia. And then splenomegaly can be seen. Blood vomitings, that means because of formation of these varices, along with this vomiting, blood will be spilled out, and melena can be seen. And then what are the symptoms of varices? Black tarry stools, that we call it as melena, and bloody stools, lightheadedness, paleness, and vomitings. Paleness is due to anemia. So these are the symptoms of varices. And then how do we treat these varices? So primary prevention of bleeding episode. So first we have to prevent the patient from undergoing to getting bleeding. So then for treating this portal hypertension, we'll put the patient on beta blockers like propranolol. It is given in the dose of 40 mg initially, and increasing every 3 to 7 days. And then maintenance dose like 80 to 240 mg for every 8 to 12 hours, not exceeding 60 mg per day, can be given. And then nadolol, that is 10 to 30 mg for every 12 hours, can be given orally. And then timolol, 10 to 30 mg for every 12 hours, that means twice a day, can be given. And then its maintenance dose like 20 to 40 mg per day can be given. And the other is isosorbide mononitrate. It can be given at the dose of, it's also a antihypertensive drug. It will be given in the dose of 30 to 60 mg once a day in the morning. And then what do you mean by ascites? As I said, that ascites is accumulation of fluid in the peritoneal cavity. So this condition is also known as peritoneal cavity fluid, or peritoneal fluid excess, or hydroperitoneum. Hydro means fluid or water. Peritoneum, that means accumulation of water in the peritoneal region, is called as hydroperitoneum. Okay, so how do we treat these ascites? Generally, if we give low salt diet, obviously it will facilitate the elimination of ascites. That means when there is a decrease in the sodium intake, it will facilitate the elimination of excess water that build up or get accumulated in the peritoneal cavity. Like 60 to 90 milliequivalent per day only has to be given. And then mild ascites is hard to notice. Like when patients who are having ascites, their stomach will be like protruded because of accumulation of fluid. So that we call it as general abdominal distension. Like amounts of up to 3 to 5 liters can get accumulated in the peritoneal cavity. What are the symptoms of ascites? Abdominal distension with fullness in the flank region, and abdominal and back pain, and gastroesophageal reflux disease. As why gastroesophageal reflux? So when the intra-abdominal pressure increases, it causes the reflux of the contents into the esophagus. So that is how it causes gastroesophageal reflux. And then management of cirrhotic ascites. So first, bed rest And then sodium restriction like 60 to 90 milliequivalents per day to 1500. Like initially this much of amount we have to maintain, and later on as the patient is improving, we can give till 1500 to 2000 mg of salt per day. And these are the diuretics. So to remove the excess water, we'll be giving diuretics, or to induce diuresis, we are giving this like spironolactone 100 to 40 mg per day, furosemide 40 to 160 mg per day, and hydrochlorothiazide 50 mg per day can be given. So there is another process. So if when there is very much, like when there is more amount of fluid got accumulated in the peritoneal cavity and which is not being responded to medications, then we'll go for a procedure called abdominal paracentesis. That means here, if you see, this is the abdomen and this is the peritoneal cavity. This is the peritoneal cavity. So whatever the white thing is there, this is the fluid which got accumulated in the peritoneal cavity. This we call it as ascites. This is the bowel wall, this is the stomach, this is the rectum. So here we'll be inserting a drainage. That means we'll be inserting some kind of pipe like catheter we'll put into this peritoneal by making a small incision, and then here we'll under pressure compression we'll suck, or we'll do suction of all this peritoneal fluid or ascitic fluid will be drained using this drainage catheter into this container. So this process is called as abdominal paracentesis. Okay, so this is done when there is a large amount of fluid got accumulated in the peritoneal cavity, then we'll go for, and when they are not responding to these medications, then we'll go for abdominal paracentesis. Okay, and then hepatic encephalopathy. I said that hepatic encephalopathy is nothing but accumulation or high level of toxins in the blood due to liver damage. As I said, that liver has a capability to show detoxification. It has a capability to do detoxification. So when there is liver damage, detoxification will not be taken place. So all the toxins get accumulated within the blood. So there will be high level of toxins in the blood. That we call it as hepatic encephalopathy. So what could be the symptoms of hepatic encephalopathy? There will be symptoms like agitation, confusion, disorientation, muscle stiffness, muscle tremors, difficulty speaking in difficulty in speaking, and sometimes it may leads to coma. So these are the symptoms of hepatic encephalopathy. Like all these were like related to mental disorder, like agitation, confusion, disorientation. Disorientation means doing something and talking something, that we call disorientation. Muscle stiffness can be seen, muscle tremors can be seen, difficulty speaking, and in serious cases it leads to coma. So what was the treatment that we give for hepatic encephalopathy? So lactulose 15 to 30 ml orally 2 to 4 times per day. Antibiotics like metronidazole 250 mg orally 3 times daily, and neomycin to 0.5 to 1 gram, like 0.5 mg to 0.5 gram, that means 50 mg to 500 mg to 1 gram orally every 6 to 12 hours for 7 days. And rifaximin, it's also an antibiotic, 400 mg orally thrice a day. So these are the drugs given. And then LOLA, that is L-ornithine, L-aspartate. So it will be given when there is elevated SGOT and SGPT for a longer time. Then we'll go for this. And when this is available even in the injection form, it will be given as an infusion. So this will improve this deranged SGOT SGPT levels. And then Udiliv tablet also can be given for, that will be given for jaundice. And then the other treatment other than this pharmacological treatment, non-pharmacological treatment is abstinence, alcohol abstinence. So this cannot be done all of a sudden. Gradually the dose of this alcohol consumption has to be decreased, and then slowly we have to stop taking alcohol. That is called as alcoholic abstinence. And there are few centers which will help the patients in getting this alcoholic abstinence. And nutrition, proper nutrition should be given. As I said, that when there is vitamin A and vitamin E deficiency, there won't be proper regeneration of the damaged hepatocytes. So we have to give supplements of vitamin A and vitamin E. And also drug therapies, like as we all discussed, all these other drug therapies, and liver transplantation. So when there is a severe cirrhotic condition, almost 90% of the liver got damaged, and then at that situation, that point of view, we have to go for liver transplantation. So say no to alcohol. So So if you stop alcohol, it will decrease the progression in cirrhosis. Like less than 20% of patients will demonstrate progression of liver disease after abstinence. So these are the epidemiological or survey what survey outcomes. Nutritional diet, and they, because they'll be having decrease in the appetite, so there will be malnutrition can be seen. So we have to give like proper nutrients should be supplied. Protein calorie malnutrition will be there, so we have to give supplements of proteins and calories. And there will also be deficiency of vitamins, trace elements including vitamins, thiamine, folate, pyridoxine, zinc. So all these supplements, whatever they are in deficient amounts, we have to give supplements. And then if there is an alcoholic hepatitis, inflammation is there, then we have to give anti-inflammatory drugs like prednisolone is an anti-inflammatory medication. It is given in a dose of 40 mg orally daily for 4 weeks, then taper the dose. And then if there is folic acid deficiency, and they are more prone to folic acid deficiency, why? Because they will be having bleeding, right? In case of esophageal varices, so or blood in the stools or melena. So in that conditions, there will be folic acid deficiency. For that, we'll be giving 1 mg orally daily in conjugation with improved dietary intake. And thiamine deficiency, that is vitamin B1 deficiency. So for that, we'll be giving 100 mg orally, or it is also available as subcutaneous injection, which can be given daily for 2 weeks, or until it or whatever the amount that is lost, until that amount is repleted, we have to give this injection. And then vitamin D deficiency, then we have to give this supplement like ergocalciferol. It is given in the dose of 12,000 to 50,000 international units orally daily. And then we have to reassess vitamin D serum levels in 2 to 3 months. So after giving this, then we have to again check the serum vitamin D levels in 2 to 3 months. And then if there is vitamin E deficiency, vitamin E 400, it's available in the brand name of Evion, 400 international units orally daily. So if you take it orally, then only it will be repleted. If you keep it topically, it doesn't show any effect, doesn't matter. And then vitamin A deficiency, 25,000 to 50,000 international units orally 3 times weekly will be given. So these are the vitamin A suspension. It's available in the suspension form. Nivagen ergocalciferol. And then this is the vitamin E. This is vitamin E. And then silymarin acts as an antioxidative and antifibrotic. So antifibrotic drug. As we know that in the mechanism, we have seen that there will be release of certain oxygen radicals. So in order to counteract that, we'll be giving certain antioxidants like silymarin. And antifibrotic, it also has an antifibrotic properties. So it will prevent, or it will stop from the hepatitis stage to go into fibrotic stage. So for that, it will be given. And also it is believed to enhance liver regeneration, so and protect the hepatocytes from toxicity. The dose usually given is like 140 mg 2 to 3 times per day. This is how these tablets were available. Silymarin tablets, Silibon 140. And then liver transplantation. It remains the only definitive therapy is liver transplantation. So if the patient is at the stage of alcoholic hepatitis, it's contraindicated to go for liver transplantation. Only when it is a cirrhotic liver, then only we have to go for liver transplantation. So this is what all about the treatment of alcoholic liver disease. So first we have seen this. What is portal hypertension and what are the drugs or medications given for the treating this, like antihypertensives like beta blockers and isosorbate mononitrate. And for ascites, we'll be going for this. What are we giving? We are giving alcohol, like diuretics will be given, and then sodium restriction is the main goal. And then if it's not getting responded, then we'll go for abdominal paracentesis. And for hepatic encephalopathy, we'll be giving antibiotics as there is high levels of toxins, and L-ornithine L-aspartate can be given. And alcoholic abstinence is a major thing. And the nutritional diet, as they'll be having deficiency of certain nutritional things like vitamins, proteins, nutrients, trace elements, zinc, folic acid, thiamine, all these supplements has to be given. And for alcoholic hepatitis, we'll be giving this anti-inflammatory drug like prednisolone will be given. And these are the supplements, like these are the doses, and we have to check for the serum levels in 2 to 3 months. And then antioxidant and antifibrotic properties are seen in silymarin. So it's also given for alcoholic liver disease. And if the patient is not responding to any of these, and the stages like when it reaches end stage or cirrhotic stage, the last and final option we have is to go for liver transplantation. So this is what all about alcoholic liver disease. So prevention is better than cure. So I don't say that don't consume alcohol, but take it in limited amounts. And as we have seen that it's better to prevent. So occasionally is acceptable, but daily it will be harmful to you. So be careful. I hope everybody is clear with this topic. Okay then. Thank you all. Thank you everyone. So this is what all about alcoholic liver disease. Thank you.